Well, let's go to Washington and talk to Dr. Webster Tarpley, author and historian. Welcome to the programme, sir. Dr. Tarpley, here we have the al-Nusra Front claiming responsibility for hundreds of acts of terror. Why then is nothing done to contain this group, which itself is admitting to acts of terror?
Well, I think we have some mixed signals from the Obama regime here. Let us hasten to say that anybody calling himself Free Syrian Army is in fact a representative of the Nusra Front, because we're getting reports every day of more and more units of the so-called FSA showing their true colors or going over to Nusra and proclaiming themselves full-fledged terrorists, Al-Qaeda disciples, death squads in every sense of the word. Now, we had, in the last 24 hours, Ambassador Robert Ford of the State Department, somebody who did a lot to get this tragic rebellion going in the first place. Ambassador Robert Ford, who is a past master of death squad deployments, having learned it from Negroponte in Baghdad some years ago, he crossed into Syria not with the permission of the Syrian government, but to go and meet General Idriss. And this General Salim Idriss is the new golden boy here. He is the darling of the CIA and the State Department, and it looks like Ford is trying to coordinate the next move with Idriss. You can think of Idriss as the new Ahmed Chalabi, somebody the U.S. is grooming to become dictator of the country. However, at the same time, we had yesterday afternoon in Washington, the Soret Symposium of WINEP, the Washington Institute for Near East Peace, which is a very strongly pro-Israeli organization. Their symposium was going to host U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, as well as two generals of the terrorist Nusra FSA. That would have been Colonel Zakaria and Colonel Akidi from Aleppo. And this is blown apart. The two death squad people didn't show, perhaps because the Obama administration decided it would be too hot to have the Secretary of Defense, the boss of the Pentagon, appear in public with these two characters. So we have two lines, really. We have John Kerry, back from his travels, saying that he thinks there's strong evidence that the Assad government is using chemical weapons, but Joe Biden, who still hopes to run for president, says no, he's confused. He's not sure at all that there is any such proof against Assad. So we have a kind of a mixed picture going on right now.
Indeed. But I mean, how close are we to an Iraqi-style intervention of Syria? I mean, taking into consideration accusations of chemical weapons being used in Syria.
Well, there's a lively debate. Everybody was struck by the revelations from Carla Del Ponte, very experienced veteran UN official at the beginning of the week, saying there was plenty of evidence that the death squads had been using chemical weapons, poison gas, but not Assad. There's an attempt, obviously, first by the British with Haig and then Cameron and so forth. They're trying to get back to the standard NATO line that only Assad has to be blamed for everything going on inside the country. There's also the question of military deterrence, and this would be those famous S-300 missiles, the surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft missiles. Foreign Minister Lavrov of the Russian Foreign Ministry said today that Russia will deliver all weapons that have been contracted for. That could include these S-300s. They're known as SA-10s or Grumble in the NATO parlance. But that contract was sealed back in the previous decade. It was interrupted by Medvedev, another cardinal blunder by Medvedev. But if Lavrov says everything that has been contracted for will be delivered, this is another way of giving the NATO aggressive powers a second thought about whether they really want to do this. And we've got to remember that the Geneva conference is presumably coming up, and some people would want to use that as a kind of a new Munich September 1938 at the expense of Syria, dividing up the country. But I think there are some other forces that don't want to see that happen, primarily Russia. As long as Russia hangs tough, the situation, I think, can be salvaged. The other thing that gets lost in all this is that the the Assad government is winning on the ground. The overwhelming facts on the ground in the past couple of weeks are the rebels are losing, Assad is winning, and this really accounts for this entire flap, this new round of attention for what's going on inside Syria. The NATO people are afraid that their assets are going to be defeated.
Indeed. I mean, recently we had Hezbollah Secretary General Said Hassan Nasrallah saying they would not let Assad's administration fall. Just how likely will Hezbollah become physically involved, and what would the impact be if so?
Well, they may well be. And Hezbollah, of course, is a formidable military organization. At least as we've seen them on the defense, they're just about unbeatable. Inside Syria, that may or may not be the same thing, but that is obviously a military organization to take very seriously. And I think the idea is that these ragtag death squads have in some ways reached the end of the rope militarily, and that for them now the perspective is that things get harder and harder, and that the key areas, for example, there's a key road leading from southern Syria into Jordan that has been taken over by the Syrian Arab Army. This is Kirbet, Galalim, and there are some other places around Aleppo, around Damascus, and in that sort of crucial southeast corner of Syria that have come under the control of the army. So the military perspective for the rebels doesn't look so good.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Many thanks to Dr. Webster Tarpley, author and historian from Washington. As always, thanks for your time there.